Okay, so now that we've talked about those last bits, we need to start thinking about our message, our creative, and our merchandising requirements. Okay, in other words, we know who we're going to talk to, we know how often we're going to talk to them, we know what the reach is that we require. Right, what's it all going to start to look like? And we start thinking about the creative requirements. And what we're talking about there is the, thinking about what is it that we want to put out there. And that's going to start to give us a bit of an idea about what media vehicle is required. If we're a full, colourful, artistic expression, and then we're going to put it on a radio ad, that's really not going to make a whole lot of sense, okay? Because if we're creating very visual things, then having an auditory-based, form of communication might not necessarily be the right way. We might need the right voiceovers or something like that to try and help create the message. Or, once again, there's a bit of tailoring that's going to be required. Okay, so sound and images, much better for things like TV, whereas text or copy or stuff where we have to write a lot of things down, really not suitable for TV. I can't have this big written text appearing on the TV screen. Has to be a very easy to understand message. So if it's going to be very text driven or a lot of documentation, clearly making some sort of print ad would be the way to go there, whether it's in a magazine, flyer, whatever. So I've got to sort of think about what is it that I'm doing, okay? So once again, audio-visual stuff lends itself great to things like TV, visual aids, watching it, YouTube ads, whatever it happens to be. On the other hand, if there's a lot of written text and a lot of information, probably needs to go in a written form, in which case we're looking at newspapers, magazines, flyers, etc. So just sort of trying to think about what it is that we're putting out there. Okay, so they're not always specified by the advertiser, but they do occur in advertising, okay? So we need to make sure that, whoever's going to end up running this has got a fairly clear idea of what we're trying to achieve. We might not put the specifics across as the people trying to advertise, but at some point, it's going to have to get picked up in the cycle to make sure that it's thought through. A lot of time people just go, this is the message I want, and they just punch it out there without sort of thinking about, well, hang on, how do we want to best achieve that? Okay, so one of the other things is that we might have non-specific stuff also coming up, particularly when you've got collaborations. An example of that is when a local business wants to associate its brand with a local charity, okay, if they want to be seen as socially responsible. And a good one of those is, you sort of see it from time to time. Your local sports team will go out onto the field and across their thing they'll have, they've got their little logo up here, and they've got, my company logo on the front of their jumpers and jerseys and all that sort of gear. Okay, so what's happening is I'm still advertising myself. Notionally, to some degree, I'm sort of saying I have some affiliation or a community spirit that I'm interested in supporting local charities, etc. So I'm putting a bit of a message out there, but I don't actually have any written copy that goes with that, okay? I've got my logo on there, I've got all that sort of stuff, but it's really about just being present. And I don't have a whole lot of creative control over what's going to happen with my brand and logo. I'm just sort of putting it out there so that people got that very passive understanding about that I fit into their community. And that really leads us then to the legal, the ethical, and the voluntary constraints about what I do. Because this advertising is happening in a social space, I must make sure that I'm being legally compliant and that I'm going with proper codes of conduct. Okay? So what we're talking about there is advertisers, as advertisers, we need to be really aware of social or cultural values. And where this breaks down, and I've seen this before, that we'll jump on that in a second actually, the thing that we need to think about is there are often specific legislations and code of conduct that apply to advertising. Basically making false and misleading claims, etc. We can't say our product does things we can't. There's a lot of things we need to be mindful of. And there may be variations depending on your country of operation, okay, so they're not uniform across the world. We need to make sure that if we're operating in the space and advertising that space, that we're mindful of these. Now, a prime example of this was we had one of the major banks actually used to sponsor football. And when I say football, I mean rugby, as in rugby league. And they had their logo on the front of all these jumpers out here. And they were very happy to be sponsoring youth playing football. And everything was going fairly swimmingly for a long time. They had a long custom and tradition of supporting that. All those people ran out there with their bank logo on the front of the shirt, and everything was going swimmingly. The bank got some good, sort of feeling and vibe from the community until they had a fair few incidents of the players fighting on the field. Unfortunately, the fights on the field led to a lot of major news headlines, and all that bank who was sponsoring these people saw was their logo covered in blood as people are punching each other on the football field, and all of a sudden it wasn't having quite the PR impact that they were hoping it had. So while they were very keen to be out there supporting the local community, the message that was coming back wasn't really in their control, and the only way they could do that was to withdraw the sponsorship and get out of that space, which was a shame because obviously the football players lost it, but the brand needed to think about the damage that was being done to it. And as it turned out, they went off and sponsored some other people who were playing, I hate to use a bad diagram, they're out there playing cricket. All right, so that's what they did. They went off and sponsored the cricket teams instead, where people aren't beating each other up. Terrible drawing right now. Sorry I did it in a hurry. But, you get the idea. They're going to sponsor a cricket team because, you know what, there's not a whole lot of fights in the cricket team. So they still get the benefit of being able to say, look, we're progressive, we're supporting our community, we're doing these things, which is really their message, and creating more brand awareness and to create goodwill from their customers. And that was really what they're trying to do. So think about your merchandise. Bear in mind that people are going to buy that. They buy these jumpers and then other people wear them around. So your brand goes all over the place, not just on the team, but people who follow that team now start wearing your brand as well. So you become intertwined and interlinked with it. And that's a great selling point as long as it still looks good. Make sure you think about the laws, all right? You can go to the Advertising Federation of Australia. They've got Communications and Media Authority, ACMA. That's another body there, Australian Performing Rights Association, which is APRA. And you can have a look at Free TV Australia. Quite a lot of places there. So ACMA, APRA, and Free TV Australia, a couple of good sources there for information. There's a few others out there who can certainly give you a bit of legal and ethical background about what you can and cannot say in your media and marketing. All right, lots of information out there. Make sure you check it out, okay? Some of it's good reading, and you'll find out a bunch of really cool football stories while you're at it, so get into it. All right, cheers.